We're on to week 17 in the Circa Million contest. I am Nick Whalen here from RotoWire talking through some of the games that we may want to include in our entry this week. The lines just came out about half hour ago or so. So we had a chance to kind of monitor those throughout the week, guess where they were going to land. But we have the official numbers locked in. And as always, if you're new here, once these lines come out on Thursday around noon Central, they do not change. So we are locked in at these numbers, regardless of some of the injury news that we'll be monitoring throughout the week. We're looking at another backup quarterback heavy week. As of right now, by my count, I think we have 13 confirmed starters that will be backup quarterbacks, or at least quarterbacks who are different from the teams or the quarterbacks that were thrown out there in week one. There could be more. We're monitoring Jacksonville specifically, Trevor Lawrence. Still waiting on some positive news there. Not that he's played all that well over the last couple of weeks, but was not on the field during the media accessible portion of practice earlier today. So we may be adding CJ Beathard to that list later today. But we'll do a quick recap of how things went in week 16. We'll talk about some of the games that we may want to include on our Circa card. And of course, we're brought to you by Circa Resort and Casino. It is still football season over at Circa. They got the best pool in history. It's called Stadium Swim. We're talking 3 levels, 6 pools, a 143-foot diagonal screen. It's basically a jumbotron that you'd see at like any NFL stadium, just sitting out there next to the pool. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros, and you can catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options. They got day beds, temperature-controlled cabanas, you name it. They got TVs in the cabanas. We always go out to Circa every summer for the annual RotoWire trip. I've been there, for some non-RotoWire activities as well. Easily my favorite place to stay, my favorite place to gamble, my favorite sports book out in Vegas. But if you're looking for that, pool experience, especially this time of year, most pools are closed down. Not the case at Stadium Swim. It's located at Circa Resort and Casino, and it's open 365 days a year, all sports, all seasons. You can book your stay today at circalasvegas.com. That is circalasvegas.com. All right, so we got 2 weeks left in the Circa Million contest. We are still scratching and clawing, trying to find our way into the money for quarter 4, but we went 2 and 3 last week, so we're facing an uphill climb over these last 2. We hit on Detroit. We hit on Cleveland. That one, felt good early on. Detroit had to hold on. Ended up needing a late interception to seal that one, despite allowing 400-plus yards to Nick Mullins. But that is neither here nor there. We got the win on those 2 games. We lost on Buffalo. That was a crusher. I love that spot for the Buffalo Bills. I could not believe that they needed a game-winning field goal to beat this version of the LA Chargers, even on the road. Maybe it should have been an obvious letdown spot for Buffalo, and clearly it was. But we lost that one. We lost on the Dallas Cowboys. We like them to win that game really straight up against the Miami Dolphins. And look, when you're fumbling on the 1-yard line to open the game, you're going to be facing an uphill battle. And obviously Miami held on and won that game. We lost on the San Francisco 49ers as well. And, that one, that's on me. That was one of my favorite picks of the year. I thought San Francisco was going to send a message. I thought they were going to steamroll the Baltimore Ravens. We'll talk about San Francisco in a little bit, whether or not we want to go back to the well. They are big favorites again this week. They're on the road at the Commanders. But I was shocked by what we saw from the 49ers, specifically Brock Purdy. 5 interceptions between Purdy and Sam Darnold, who made a quick cameo, made sure to throw one last pick late in the fourth quarter. That's just not who San Francisco's been all year. I know they've had their playoff shortcomings, but I really thought that was a spot where they would steamroll the Ravens, and obviously they did not. So we will discuss, myself and my partner, John McKechnie, whether or not we are going to trust the San Francisco 49ers. And we'll get into that game right now. They're 13-point favorites on the road at Washington. I think this is an obvious bounce back spot for the 49ers. I think you're getting arguably the worst defense in football right now, a team that was down 27-7 at one point to the New York Jets this past week. Of course, they did rally back and found a way to almost win that game before giving up a long field goal as time expired. But this is just a Washington team that has been so bad, really, since their bye week. And early on, they were frisky. They were putting up points. You kind of a team that you had to worry about week to week. It felt like they could kind of hang in there with anybody on any given week. That has not been the case. The defense just continues to get worse. However, they are going to Jacoby Brissett, who I think might be the best backup quarterback in the NFL, which is saying a lot because we've seen so many backups this season. But 2 weeks ago, he came in and almost led somewhat of a comeback late against the LA Rams. I think he is he's a clear upgrade from the version of Sam Howell that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 weeks. So that does give me some pause, but to me, San Francisco, they're not really dealing with many injuries. I think everything that could have gone wrong for them in terms of turnovers, in terms of penalties, they had 10 penalties for over 100 yards on Monday night against the Ravens. If you're doing that and you're turning the ball over 5 times with 5 picks that essentially handed points to the Ravens and some of which, took points off the board for the Niners, it's really tough to win games. But you dig into some of those numbers, they were still at 6.3 yards per play last week against the Ravens. They were up over 7 yards per play going into the fourth quarter. So it's not like this team, I think, has any deep-rooted issues. I think it really comes down to the turnovers and the penalties. The Niners have already won 8 games this season by at least 16 points. They have 10 wins by at least 10 points. They have pretty much essentially always taken care of business in these spots against bad teams. So I like the Niners minus 13. I know it's a big number. I know we maybe have to do a slight reevaluation on this team after last week. But going from facing that Ravens defense to facing this Commanders defense, to me, that supersedes any boost that Washington may get from Jacoby Brissett. So I would be pretty surprised here if San Francisco doesn't come out with a vengeance, try to remind everybody, hey, we're not the team that we look like we were last week against Baltimore. And really motivationally, San Francisco needs to keep its foot on the gas here. They need to keep winning. They may need to win out to hang on to that 1 seed in the NFC. Obviously, that is ultra important. Philly's got an easy schedule the rest of the way. They should win their last 2. So I don't really see this as a pullback or a letdown spot for the 49ers. Other games we're keeping an eye on, Texans Titans. This one locked at 5.5 in favor of Houston in the Circa contest. Texans beat the Titans a couple of weeks ago in Nashville with Case Keenum, right? And that was an ugly game. They fell behind early. Tennessee led by a couple of scores. Not proud to admit we had Tennessee on the card that week, and Case Keenum got us. He did. But C.J. Stroud, in all likelihood, will be back. He went through a practice on Thursday, barring some sort of setback. He'll be out there. Nico Collins made his return last week. Still might not be 100%, but full expectation is that he'll play. Will Anderson should be back in the mix. We'll see on Noah Brown. Missing Tank Dell, that's big for this Houston team, but I really like this spot for the Texans. Catching Tennessee, I think, at a pretty good time. A Titans team that really doesn't have much to play for. They're going on the road now. Maybe going back to Will Levis this week, which to me is a lateral move at best. I think Ryan Tannehill at this point probably gives Tennessee as good, if not a better chance to win than Will Levis. And, Levis did practice in full on Thursday. So I think all signs point to him being back under center for Tennessee. To me, that's a good thing if you're on the Houston side. And look, I know a lot of things went Houston's way, late in that game against Tennessee. But if you're able to go into Nashville and win that game without C.J. Stroud, without Nico Collins, and you're telling me that those two guys are back, and especially Stroud, I think that's worth probably at least 2.5 or 3 points here when you start to look at the line. So I like the Texans to cover the 5.5, win this game by at least a touchdown. I know C.J. Stroud, he's 1-5 against the number as a dog this season, but this is a must-win game for the Houston Texans, especially with the Jags facing the Carolina Panthers. So we'll talk about that game momentarily, but we like the Texans minus 5.5 to take care of business with C.J. Stroud back in the lineup. The Las Vegas Raiders. Do we trust the Raiders? Do we trust the Colts? These are big questions. This feels like a stay away to me, but we're getting it at 3.5. Vegas plus 3.5 in the Circa contest. If it was sitting right at 3, I would be staying far, far away. But I kind of like this Raiders team right now, what they're doing defensively. More than anything, I think I like the under 43.5. But I think Vegas is in a good spot to at least, keep this to a field goal one way or the other. I don't think it's a blowout situation. I'm trying not to overvalue the Raiders based on what we've seen from them over the last 2 weeks. You almost put up 70 on the Chargers, and then you have that performance last week against Kansas City. We do need to be cognizant that this is still not a good offense for the Raiders. And, that's what really concerns me, because the Colts have that week-to-week variability, right? I think you never quite know which version you're going to get. Over their last few games, they've blown out some teams. They've been blown out. They played some close games. Like, you just never really know what to expect with the Colts. But, you're getting, a high variance offense in Indy, an offense that struggled to run the ball of late. And you're getting a defense that's playing really, really well under Antonio Pierce in the Raiders. And I don't think these teams are all that dissimilar, and both teams are still playing for something. The Raiders are still alive for a wild card. Obviously the Colts, they might still be alive for the AFC South title, depending on what happens with Jacksonville over these next couple of weeks. So motivationally, I think it's kind of a wash, but if you're giving me the Raiders and you're giving me 3.5 points, that's the way I would lean. So this one is not a lock for the card by any means. I'll have to run this by my guy John, but I do think at this number, getting the hook with Vegas, that is the way I would lean. Carolina, Jacksonville is an interesting one. Full disclosure, I am a Jaguars fan. This has been an extremely rough last 4 or 5 weeks for me mentally. The slide that started with that Monday night game against Cincinnati has continued and worsened over the last few weeks. It feels like the Jags really hit rock bottom against Tampa Bay this past week, going down 27-0. Credit to Trevor Lawrence for pushing through, the myriad of injuries that he's been dealing with, but he's been a disaster. He's, not been taking care of the ball whatsoever over these last few weeks. It's always been a problem for him, but I think it's hard to overstate just how much the Jags miss Christian Kirk. You look at the depth chart and it's like, all right, he's your second, maybe even third receiver. Why does that matter so much? It really matters for the Jags. And really, as soon as he went out is when it felt like things took a turn. The defense has slipped. They've been bottom 10 in defensive EPA during this slide. The offense has been a complete disaster. And really the running game is something that's plagued them, I think, worse than anything. And even when they were winning games, when they were 8-3 to begin the season, they were skating by with a very, very shaky running game. And I know Travis Etienne, he's been great for fantasy, or at least he was through the early to middle portions of the season, but they ran for 37 yards last week. I mean, the Jags running game is non-existent. It doesn't even seem to matter who they play. It's not like they're going through this gauntlet of great running defenses. I mean, they have, in my opinion, the worst run blocking line in the league. They've struggled to protect Trevor Lawrence as well. He's been under a ton of pressure over these last couple of weeks. All of this is leading to me, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I like the Carolina Panthers plus 6.5. I really do. This game's in Jacksonville, but the Jags have been terrible at home this season. They are 10-18 against the number after a straight up loss in the Trevor Lawrence era. So, it checks out with what you watch, right? This team, when things go bad, they tend to snowball. And that's certainly what we've seen over the last month. They are 2-5 straight up, 2-5 against the number at home this season. Trevor Lawrence, 5-12 against the spread in his career against sub 500 teams. Of course, the rub here is that we don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to play. And again, he was not available during the media accessible portion of practice today. We've been through the song and dance now for 4 straight weeks. We do these videos. I make my picks in the middle of the week and kind of throw up your hands and say, I don't know if he's going to play. Recent history would suggest that he'll find a way to push through. I don't know if that's going to happen this week. I think we've had so many injuries for Lawrence. The concussion, the ankle, some concerns with the knee. Now it's the shoulder. I think maybe this is the week where the Jags pull him out. We see CJ Beathard. And to me, I know Lawrence hasn't played well, but it's CJ Beathard, man. It's in no way an upgrade. To me, it's still a downgrade, even though Lawrence has been really disappointing over the last month. And look, even if Lawrence plays, the way the Jags have performed over the last month, why should they be getting 6.5 against a Carolina team that just put up 30 on, granted, a very bad and very poorly coached Green Bay defense, but Carolina's got nothing to lose at this point. They're not worried about their draft pick. They don't even own their own first round pick. They're likely handing the number 1 pick to the Chicago Bears. So I'm a little bit scared of a Carolina team with nothing to lose going into Jacksonville, where the Jags have not played well this season. Carolina's 3-1-1 against the number since firing Frank Reich. Doug Peterson, historically bad as a favorite. He's one of those underdog coaches you'd like to target. And Carolina's held 3 of their last 5 opponents well under 100 yards rushing. I don't think the Jags get there this week. That part of their offense is just dead to me at this point. And, all season, obviously Carolina's been a mess on offense. The performance we saw from Bryce Young last week against Green Bay, that's not who he's been. He's typically been somebody who sits, under 200 yards most weeks. And I think Jacksonville's defense puts up a better fight than Green Bay did. That's really the one edge that I think the Jags have is, as shaky as this defense has been, I think they're in a good spot there, but I don't really like them to put up a whole lot of points this week against Carolina. So this to me feels like it could be like a 20-17, 21-17 type of game. I would still take the Jaguars to win. I mean, this is an absolute must win if they want to make the playoffs. It really comes down to that for Jacksonville. But I like Carolina to cover the 6.5. I do. I don't think the Jags should be given almost a touchdown to just about anybody right now. So that's one that I'll be lobbying pretty hard to include on the card. We'll run through a couple other games and then be on our way out. Baltimore, Miami is an interesting one. Really tough to evaluate, both of these teams. It could be a letdown spot really for both sides, right? I mean, Baltimore played its biggest game of the year, came up with like an A+ performance on the road at San Francisco. Now, is there any letdown when you return home to face Miami? Obviously, the Dolphins still searching for that signature road victory. They've won 2 big games in a row. Beating Dallas this past week, I think that's now their best win of the season. But again, they still haven't really done a whole lot on the road. Tua, 2-8 straight up, 3-6-1 against the spread on the road against winning teams in his career, failing to cover those games by almost 10 points per game. That was a good note provided to us by the Action Network this week. And Lamar, 27-10 straight up as a home favorite. He is just 14-23 against the spread in those games, which is interesting. But, if you like the Ravens to win this game straight up, you probably like them to win it by at least 3. Miami 2-11 straight up as a road dog in the last 13 spots. Tua 7 of his last 9 as a road dog. Those have been losses. So I lean Baltimore here. Again, if this number was 3.5, maybe I'd lean Miami. Maybe it would be a stay away. I know 3 is not an ideal number necessarily. You could certainly see this being a field goal game. Huge implications for both sides. Baltimore's clinched a playoff berth, but obviously still want to lock up that number 1 seed in the AFC, and Miami is the chief contender for that. So I lean Baltimore at home. I think this is a defense that is rolling right now, and I think they're eager to prove themselves again against one of the better offenses in the NFL. I'm also looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another team that we're trying to be careful. We want to pump the brakes. We don't want to overvalue a team that really for most of the season has just been a middling outfit. But the offense has played really well over the last few weeks. I think this might be the best stretch of Baker Mayfield's entire career over these last couple. And getting this one at 2.5 to me is big. NFC South games this year have just been impossible. Like I don't know what, I'm probably like 2-14 trying to pick Atlanta Falcons games this season. New Orleans has been terrible against the spread. The Bucs are actually tied for the best ATS record in the NFL right now. They could stop the run, right? And New Orleans has been shaky in that regard anyway. Thought they actually put up a decent fight against the Rams last Thursday night. They do come in with more rest, but at the same time, you got to go to Tampa. I know these NFC South games always do tend to be close, but I can't believe I'm saying this, but I trust Baker Mayfield right now. I trust Todd Bowles more than I do the New Orleans Saints and Derek Carr and Dennis Allen, which are, these are 2 teams that have not been well coached all season, but I think at 2.5, the Bucs are the play there. So those are the games that I lean strongest toward. We typically don't play the Thursday games. I think we've only done it one time all season. That was on Thanksgiving. So won't be dabbling in Jets Browns. And, really, I don't love that number at Cleveland 7.5, but more than anything, we don't like to submit the picks that early because there's still a lot that needs to be decided in terms of injury reports over these next couple of days. So we'll be skipping out on the Thursday game. I will say one that I initially circled was Minnesota -2, and they were at 1.5 earlier in the week. I actually like the Vikings mostly because I think this Green Bay defense is beyond repair. I think last week hammered that home in what felt like, kind of a put up or shut up type of spot for Joe Barry. And I think the Packers were lucky to win that game, allowing 30 on the road in Carolina. But Jaron Hall starting for the Minnesota Vikings, that to me is too much of an unknown. That one makes it a stay away for me. And we're still getting Minnesota -2 in the contest. I know if you look around at some other books, you'll see the Vikings down to 1-point favorites. You'll see some 1.5s out there as well. Green Bay's favored by 1 at BetMGM. So I think that line is going to be on the move. But again, Jaron Hall to me is too much of an unknown to back the Vikings in this spot. I'm not saying I have any faith in the Green Bay defense, but I just don't really know if we can trust that in this situation. Going back to the Miami-Baltimore game, by the way, another reason that I like the Ravens here, so many injuries right now for the Miami Dolphins. Raheem Mostert did not practice today. Devon Achane, he was back at practice, but he's still been limited. Tua, he's been dealing with a quad and a thumb injury. I don't think his status is really in any true jeopardy, but they're listing him as questionable. He was limited yesterday. Again, my guess is that he plays and probably looks like himself, but something to monitor. Tyreek Hill, he was back at practice today, but still dealing with that ankle issue. And we saw Jalen Waddle go out early last week and doesn't sound like he's on track to play. And, obviously Tyreek Hill is the guy that you worry most about with this Miami offense, but you take Jalen Waddle away and it's not a receiving core that has a ton of depth, right? All of a sudden you're into Cedric Wilson and Braxton Berrios and Robbie Chosen, who's also on the injury report. And their offensive line too. I mean, they've been riddled with injuries throughout the season. Their starting center, Connor Williams, he's done for the year. He's on IR. Both of their tackles have been banged up. Teron Armstead, you wonder if he's been at 100% all year. I do think Miami, I don't think this is a blowout situation by any means, even with their struggles on the road. But if you're making me pick one way or the other, I'd lean Ravens -3. So again, in summary, we like Carolina +6.5. We like Baltimore -3. We're leaning Raiders plus 3.5. That one, I don't know if I feel strongly enough to include it on the card. We will see. Like the Texans minus 5.5. We like the Niners minus 13. And we like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers minus 2.5. So tune in to SiriusXM. You can hear RotoWire Fantasy Sports today, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday. We'll give a rundown tonight of where we're leaning on these picks. We will do a podcast on the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast feed where you can hear John and I talk through not only these games, but every game on the slate. That's kind of our back and forth each week where we whittle down the card and decide which 5 games we want to include. But appreciate everybody who's followed us along this season. Really appreciate Circa, kind of helping us out with this entry. They've been a great partner to RotoWire. Just loved playing in this contest. We got a bunch of RotoWire guys playing in Circa Survivor as well. Our sister site, bookies.com. I know they've been involved in the Circa contest, and we're hanging around. I think we're 5 games over 500 on the year. We'll take it. Obviously, we're not going to be in the money, but looking forward to making another run at it in 2024. And we thank everybody who's stuck with us, tailing our picks, fading our picks, whatever it may be week to week. But it's been a lot of fun talking through these picks and doing these videos each week. So we will keep you posted on what we ultimately settle on. But those are the games that we are leaning toward as we check out the NFL Week 17 Circa Million card. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back next week.